Harold, let me start with you, because certainly the Clean Air Act is kind of the granddaddy of the modern raft of environmental statutes that we've had since the 1970s. And if you look over the arc of our experience under the Clean Air Act, there are some undeniable positive trends, right? Since 1980, the EPA estimates we've seen a 65% drop in the 6 principal air pollutants, which include carbon monoxide, lead, ground level ozone, particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. On the other hand, your American Lung Association just put out its annual report, and here's what it wrote. It concluded that nearly 40% of Americans live in counties with, quote, unhealthful levels of either ozone or particulate pollution in 2013 to 2015, placing them at risk for premature death and other serious health effects such as lung cancer, asthma attacks, cardiovascular damage, and developmental and reproductive harm. So is the glass mostly full, or is the glass still too empty?
Well, from the American Lung Association's perspective, and as you shared, yesterday the American Lung Association released its 18th annual State of the Air report. And, quite honestly, I was encouraged with the report, while at the same time alarmed. Encouraged in the sense that we have seen the marked improvement in air quality. As you mentioned, the report has found that almost 40% of the U.S. population lives in counties where the air quality is below the level necessary. But that is an improvement. Actually, last year's report showed that almost 52% of the U.S. population lived in counties where the air quality was at a dangerous level. So we are seeing an improvement. But our concern, the reason that I said alarm, is because of what we're hearing, what we're seeing from the current administration about the rollbacks of certain regulations, about the cutbacks of the EPA budget, are very concerning to us.
Yeah.
Because, now is the time when we need to continue to make sure that those regulations that the Clean Air Act has put into place remain intact. And, so the American Lung Association is really encouraging all of us, the public, to really share our concerns and to make sure that we make air pollution a public health issue.
Well, we're going to get to that agenda in a moment. But Tonya, let's continue setting the baseline. What's your sense of, we are decades now into the Clean Air Act. Where have we made the most progress, and where do we still have the most concern?
Well, I think certainly, as Harold says, and as the American Lung Association's report stated, we've made significant progress in clean air and clean water and clean power. We've got some regulations on the books that certainly are beneficial for patients and for people. I think the concern, again, is that we need to be focused on people over politics at this point. And some of the most recent concerns and dismantling of policy and of the EPA is very concerning for us when we talk about patient advocacy. People with compromised lung health are the greatest risk for having the implications and the harm due to some of the dismantling that has been proposed.
So we've done enough ground laying or agenda setting. Let's go into where we are now in this political debate. And John, I want to start by Bill, I want to start by asking you, we were talking a little bit backstage. I arrived in Washington, when I first arrived in Washington was essentially when Ronald Reagan arrived. And the head of the EPA at that point was Ann Gorsuch, the mother of the current Supreme Court justice. It was a moment of intense controversy about the future of the agency. And I'm wondering, we are now with Scott Pruitt appointed at again a moment that has some similarities to that. How does this, you've been in Washington since 1972, how do the level of debate that you expect and kind of the challenge to the historical mission of the EPA, how does this compare to what you have seen before? Are there other periods that are comparable to this?
This is by far the most serious challenge we are facing with regard to cleaning up the environment. My first month on the job was when Ronald Reagan was elected, and there are immense similarities. He was a conservative president. He wanted to defund EPA. He wanted to roll back clean air protections. He wanted to cut funding to state and local air pollution agencies. And I spent the first 8 years of my job trying to defend the Clean Air Act. Fortunately, the Congress was there to provide the safety net against really bad things happening. We had moderate Republicans who would say no. Today is a lot different. We have a House that will vote on anything, anytime they want, and we have a Senate that is a flip of a coin depending upon the issue. They will go to the mat on some issues, but on other issues we fear, including this one, it's unclear. And may I say a quick word about the where we stand, because this is an important discussion we're having today. The State of the Air report was an excellent one, but I'm going to see you and raise you one on the State of the Air report. There are estimates today that show that between 25 and 40,000 people each year die from air pollution. Between 25,000 and 40,000 people each year die from air pollution. And this is as many as fatalities from drunk driving and from handguns. And we don't have the luxury of allowing some of these things to continue. So the State of the Air report and other studies are key to fight back some of these potential rollbacks.
You know, it was interesting, I was going to bring this up later, but on our Atlantic site, Christy Todd Whitman, who was the EPA administrator under President Bush, she wrote something that really kind of caught me up. She said, a 2013 MIT study reported that roughly 19,000 more people die prematurely from automobile pollution each year than die in car accidents. More people die from the automobile pollution than die in the car accidents themselves.
I mean, those are really amazing statistics, aren't they? And they really help us realize in terms of the connection between air pollution and lung health and public health in general. And as you know, science has shown is that air pollution is directly linked to asthma episodes, asthma attacks, the cause of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and most recently directly linked to lung cancer. So the air that we breathe, which is, you know, something, if you think about it, every breath that we take in, it affects every cell in our body. And so for that reason, you know, it's so important that we really understand the risks that are tied to air pollution. And, you know, that's really one of the key factors within the State of the Air report, because it really lets all of us better understand the air quality within each of our local communities. So, you know, if you go to lung.org, you can download our State of the Air report, and you can put in your zip code, and you can find, you know, the rankings for each of the cities across the state.
Tonya, I think the first instinct of many people when they think about air quality is to think about something like the view out that window, or where I live now in Los Angeles, where it has gone from being kind of the gray haze, 3 lonely days in a brown LA haze, to now you can kind of, you can see a long way. But is it kind of the quality of life? Should that be the centerpiece, or is it kind of the public health aspects of this debate?
I think it truly is the quality of life for all of us, but most importantly, the public health concern. So I think that one of the ways that Allergy and Asthma Network has really stepped forward is trying to make that linkage for individuals about climate change and lung health specifically, the area that we focus on. I think that if we will approach the topic more from one of health and climate rather from just climate or environment, that will be much more effective in getting our federal policymakers and state decision makers on board.
Bill, let's, before we get into the specifics of the agenda, I want to ask you about kind of the underlying premise of much of the Trump environmental agenda, because the argument has been that if Washington should step back and give states more freedom to make their own choices about how best to protect the environment, how to make any trade-offs that they see between the environment and the economy. The federal regulation, the Clean Air Act, and all of the other laws were largely built out of the assumption that it was very difficult in practice for states to handle that for a variety of reasons. What is the view of states at this point, and your view, about whether, in fact, they want to see more of this authority reverted to them?
Well, this may surprise some people. I hope not. But we believe that in order for the National Air Pollution Control Program to be effective, all levels of government have to be effective, have to be well-funded, and have to be supported, which means we support EPA doing its job because they provide important research, and they set national standards, and they provide oversight, and they settle interstate disputes. But the premise of the Trump administration has been, let's devolve all this authority away from EPA to the states, and we'll let the states do the job. We're not there yet, but we understand what they're trying to do. But at the same time, the Trump administration not only cut EPA's budget by 30% and decimated the staff by almost an equal amount, but they also turned around in the same breath and cut funding to the state and local governmental agencies. So if they really were serious about having the states pick up these authorities, they would have at least funded us, and they didn't. So it's terribly disingenuous.
If states, regardless of the funding, can state A take a hard line on environmental protection if neighboring state B is, I mean, do states want to be in a position where they are in effect kind of arbitraging against each other on the environment?
No, it's one of the reasons why they join either a regional or a national association to work together to try to work through issues collectively and not fight amongst themselves. There are so many states, you know this here, there are so many states, such as in the Northeast, who are doing everything they can, and they'll get an F from the American Lung Association because of unhealthy air, but the problem may not be caused by their actions. It may be caused hundreds of kilometers upwind. Mm-hmm. So we need more of a regional and national approach, and we do not want states having to fight amongst themselves and creating this climate where industries go to the venue with the least restrictive controls. It didn't work in the 60s, and it doesn't work today.
Harold, when you look at the proposals coming out for the 1/3 reduction in the EPA budget and some of the other regulatory changes that are already moving forward on rethinking the fuel economy requirements, the carbon emission the carbon emission requirements for cars, also the Clean Power Plan, what as you look at kind of what's happening so far, what most concerns you? What do you think is the biggest threat to public health?
Well, with all of those concerns that we have, I mean, we really look at those as being a setback in terms of what we've been able to accomplish now over the past 10 years, over the past 47 years since the Clean Air Act was enacted. And, you know, from a public health perspective, you know, we're really concerned about the number of lives that will be saved. Because right now, with the clean air standards that are in place, it's estimated that because of the Clean Air Act, we're saving more than 160,000 lives each year because of the rules and regulations that are in place. So just think about that. If we start cutting back those regulations, what type of impact is that going to have? It's going to increase asthma attacks. I mean, we're looking at the Clean Air Act now is responsible for reducing almost 2 million asthma attacks each year. So, you know, by cutting back the budget of the EPA, by rolling back to current regulations, you know, we talk about the clean energy plan in terms of the impact that will have on overall pollution, ozone pollution or particle pollution. I mean, these are all key factors, so that we just need to make sure that we keep this a public health conversation.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, please. Yeah, come in.
So I think I echo that, and I'm also concerned about the defunding of the scientific advisory boards, because we need continued scientific evidence to support the link between climate and health. And with this defunding, we're at risk for not having that objective evidence that's needed to continue to make the case.
You know, Bill, the current EPA administrator sued the agency 14 times as Oklahoma
That's all?
Attorney General, right? And certainly was at the forefront of many of them, including the Clean Power Plan, helped organize the other attorneys general to do that. He is probably, as we were saying, the administrator who has been most critical of the traditional direction of the agency since at least Ann Gorsuch, the mother of the current Supreme Court justice. How do you, understanding all of that and the fact that he is in the job, how do you kind of strategize to work with or against someone who has been so at odds with the way most advocates have seen the agency? Is there any way to reach Scott Pruitt?
Well, too early to tell. I should reinforce, in case there's any question, we are an association that is nonpartisan, apolitical, but wants to clean up the air. With that said, our way of approaching Scott Pruitt is going to be to let him know, and many others, that many of the choices that we face are not mutually exclusive. We can protect public health and welfare at the same time. If you look at the statistics, pollution levels have gone down over the past 40 years, while GDP and vehicle miles traveled and energy consumption and many other factors have increased. You can have a good economy and a good pollution control program at the same time. And when he understands this and understands the incredible legacy that governmental agencies and public health advocates and others have brought forward over the past 40 years, it would be shameful, it would be alarming if this were just overturned in a few months.
Tonya, you think this is someone you can negotiate with, or someone that ultimately you're going to have to pressure from the outside?
Well, I think we're all about raising that individual voice. And so we want individuals to raise their voice, to make their desires known, to not back down and not become politicized, too highly politicized. And I think that unfortunately that's what this has become at this time. And so I definitely think that we will activate the troops at the very ground level, grassroots level, to raise their voice, raise their concerns, and speak their opinion when it comes to these policy decisions.
Harold, what is it going to take to protect the advances that you talked about? I mean, certainly, as we've said, there's a more fundamental questioning that is underway. What do you think is going to have to happen to kind of sustain many of the programs that you have been relying on for the gains that you describe?
I mean, as Tonya and Bill referred to, is that we really need to make sure that the public is vocal on these issues, and that, we need to make sure that we have the facts so that the administration hears about the facts, make sure that they understand that the science is so critical to all of this discussion. I mean, to me, I think that that's key. It's going to be a tough battle, but I think that we can demonstrate, as Bill said, that, as air quality standards have been in place, the economy has shown improvement. And, if the better the air quality, the more productive the employees are going to be. So I think, these are all important messages for us to
I want to bring in the audience for questions.
Just a real quick point. I can make a pledge that if EPA becomes unable or unwilling to do what the public and others demand to protect public health and welfare, I know that state and local governmental agencies, with the support of others, will step in and fill the gap. We're going to do so on climate. We're doing so on many other programs, and it won't be, 100%, but there will be fights of support amongst state and local governments to do that.
I want to ask you real quick, because you brought that up. You said in an interview last year, talking about the Clean Power Plan. The Clean Power Plan was the Obama administration plan to reduce carbon emissions, setting targets by states, but giving them enormous flexibility on how to reach that. At that point, the issue was that the courts had put a stay on the implementation of the rule. And you said, even if the court vacates the rule, it's not going to mean those progressive states are going to stand down. What about now, with the Trump administration indicating that they intend to rewrite, revoke and rewrite the rule? Do you expect some states to continue to develop and implement their own carbon reduction plans nonetheless?
Yes.
You do?
I do. The train has left the station. They would do it even without the Clean Power Plan because industry is asking for it. The smart industries understand the opportunities of doing things more efficiently, more cheaply, and relying upon renewables. State and local governmental agencies are meeting, even in this region, are meeting among states, between regions, and they're looking to do things without the federal government interfering. We'd much rather have a framework of national support, but absent a framework, you will see far more actions taken in the next few years, especially if the federal government backs out.
Let's bring in the audience. Do we have some questions? I see one over there in the back. Lindsay.
Okay. Actually, I can hold it. It's okay. Hello, my name is Janet Ginsburg, and I do a lot of work with consultancies and think tanks and the occasional innovation conference, but my background is deeply in science and technology journalism. And a couple of questions here. One, looking at all of the advances in everything from AI and robotics and drones and IoT and citizen science, what sort of potential is there for a citizens EPA effort? In other words, if I had something on my cell phone where I could put it out my window every day and take in air quality readings, I would do it, and I think millions of people would do it. Is there another approach here? And the other sort of thing I wanted to bring out, you're focusing very much on direct human health, but air pollution has a tremendous effect on agriculture, which has a tremendous effect on food supplies. So this is a little bit bigger than just us.
Thanks. Interesting question. To what extent can technology and individual action replace kind of the traditional structures that we have for protecting the environment? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll try. A very good question on the citizen science. There is a significant effort nationwide on the use of personal monitors. And there are some personal monitors that are very, very good and some that are not so good. And there is a potential problem, without getting too much in the weeds, if a not so very good personal monitor ends up defining the wrong health-based air quality standard, then you're setting the system up for kind of a false sense of security. It may be too weak or too strong. And so citizen monitors, for example, certainly should help supplement but not replace the deteriorating monitoring infrastructure that we're currently facing at the state and local level. The solution is to get more funding to have good monitors everywhere and to augment it with the citizen monitors. And on ag, I'll punt that one.
Well, I mean, I think we all agree that definitely the impact on agriculture and on our food sources is critically important. And again, does come back to individual health, right, and population health. And so certainly that's part of the argument that's being made for why we should be concerned about climate and air and its impact on health.
Let's see, we have one more.
Hey, I'm Jonathan Salem Baskin, and I have a question about, it might be too broad, but the alternative to government regulation, at least I think the debate, is let the markets decide, right? That's the philosophical debate. Markets will regulate themselves. I think I know the answer, but can you just, each of you, give your take on, if you had to give the elevator pitch on why that doesn't work when it comes to air quality, just so we could have it in the back of our heads?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I'll take a stab at that. In terms of, I mean, what's really key is having the science behind this to help set the regulations and to monitor, and also on the enforcement side. I mean, that's how I would respond to the importance of the Clean Air Act and the EPA and the role that they play in helping to control the levels of air pollution, which are key, that we need to keep those intact now.
I would say that there are a few basic human rights, and air should be one of them. And it should not be, again, yes, we live in a capitalist market, and I don't think that any of us want to go to any other type of market system. And yet, air is something that's universal. And truly, that, again, I think we need that greater, broad policy support.
And to the person in the elevator, first I would say to her, say to him, please turn off your cell phone so we can have a conversation. and then, I'm old school. But then I would say, if you left it to industry, and I'm going to be gentle here, because there are very good industries, I don't want to paint too broad a brush, but if you left it to industry to determine the extent to which they should regulate mercury from power plants, you would think they would say yes, because mercury emissions are a neurotoxin. We have a mercury rule in place. Almost every industry is complying now, and yet these same industries are suing EPA to undermine the entire mercury rule from power plants. And so this is what will happen. We'll revert to what happened in the 60s, where industries will be policing themselves. We need a stronger Clean Air Act, we need good oversight, and we need the ability to regulate emissions so that public health and welfare can be protected.
Bill, can I just follow up as a real quick final thought? Because you are retiring, so you're stepping down after many decades watching this. compare, at this moment, how do you rank, as you kind of look forward over the next 4 years, do you feel like the basic structure of the environmental protections that have been built are relatively securely moored, or could you see more fundamental change than previous efforts to rethink have produced?
That's a very good question, and we could spend the rest of the day on that, but I would say this. It's amazing how the Clean Air Act of 1990, almost 30 years old, has sustained itself, has evolved. And while I could tell you, 45 things to do to improve it and to bring it up to today's environment, most of the changes that are being discussed today are weakening. And you could live with this Clean Air Act for the next 20 years, not make one change, and still get the tremendous health and welfare benefits that Harold and Tonya have articulated. So we can make huge changes, but if all we did was kept the status quo and left climate change to the state and local agencies, we'd still do mighty fine.
Bill, Tonya, Harold, you've given us a great frame to start the day. Thank you. Join me in thanking this panel.